What's up, class? Evans here. I hope you're enjoying yourself and I hope you're caught up in all of your classes. That's the most important part. Just don't fall behind. Before I get into the lesson, make sure that you don't forget to click on the Google form link that is in this post so that you can answer the very basic questions I'm asking you after you take notes. So, today's topic is a big topic, one that I love to teach about, one that I really enjoy because it's connected to so many things. And this topic is product life cycle. Product life cycle, not lifestyle, by the way, life cycle, is how a product starts from beginning to end, meaning where it originates from as a natural resource all the way to what do we do when we dispose of it. This graphic that I have right here is one that I usually have students tape into their notebook. I'd encourage you to kind of draw it out yourself. The 5 key components that are all in the product life cycle is raise and extract, process, manufacture, use, and dispose. And I'm going to cover all 5 of those topics in the next couple of slides. Let's dive in. Raise and extract. At this step, you're pulling on a natural resource. And I just realized in my slide it says research, but resource. So a natural resource for the earth, such as mining aluminum and logging. So I brought 2 things with me. Let me bring those up. The item that I cut in half for you out of section 3, when we did section lines, I really wish I had a zoomed in camera showing you me cutting it in half. It would have been way cooler than what I gave you. But, you live and learn. So this is made out of 2x4s. I took 2x4s and glued them together, and then I drilled out everything, right? But it's made out of wood. So where does that wood come from? Well, it comes from pine trees. Raise and extract portion would be like the logging industry. And it's not necessarily a bunch of guys walking around with axes or saws. It's much more modernized now. Another item that I want to show you is like a Coca-Cola can, the aluminum. So I want to talk about wood and aluminum and where we get those things, how they're processed, and how they're shaped. This raise and extract step, logging for wood and mining for aluminum because it's a metal. All consumer products begin their life cycle at this one point, and it's dependence on some sort of natural resource out of our environment. At this point, of course, some form of energy is going to be used. You're going to need electricity, you're going to need manpower, you're going to need gasoline in order to power the machinery. So you're always going to be pulling from the earth, natural resources, and so forth. This is a picture of aluminum ore. Aluminum ore that looks like this is called bowite. I believe it's the more common form of aluminum ore. I think something like 80% of the aluminum ore that's mined is in that chemical format. If you would look at that, you would have probably never thought that was aluminum. The second step is process. Process, you're now taking this natural resource and you're converting it into a raw material. So the logs are going to be taken to the sawmill. You have to remove all the bark because in the bark there is bugs, trapped dirt, saps, and the bark really can't be used for building. So you take it through a machine that debarks it. It basically peels off all the bark or shreds off all the bark. Then you take it through the sawmill where a circular saw or perhaps a bandsaw, which is like a big, long, looping blade, would cut the log up. Now, at that stage, you might have a trained person cutting it up and getting the most wood out of it. Some more modernized things can scan the log and make the suggestions of where to cut to maximize the amount of wood that could be used at the end. Once you cut it up into board shapes, then inside of the wood, you might still have some bugs. You might still have some disease. There's a lot of water trapped in The wood, because, well, it was an organic plant, so it sucks water out from the ground and it's actually rather heavy. So what you need to do is kind of cook the water out. So there's a process called kiln drying or heat treating it too, and that kind of cooks out the bugs and slowly pulls out the water. But it also causes the wood to warp a little bit. So usually you cut it larger than you need, then you kiln dry it, it warps and shrinks and twists, and then you cut it to size, bundle it all up, and send it to stores like Home Depot, Lowe's, McCoy's, lumber yards, anything like that where it could be purchased. Or it could be sent to other factories that maybe use wood a lot, like furniture factories. For our aluminum process, we take that boite, that weird looking rock, and you first crush it. So you send it through all of this machinery that crushes it down into small pebbles. Then you put it in a pressure vessel, and right here you're seeing kind of a basic breakdown of what's happening. A pressure vessel compresses it. It says it adds a bit of an acid to it, it looks like. My bad. That's called sodium hydroxide. It's not an acid, it's a base, which means it's alkaline on the other side of the pH scale. And then that mixture of pressure plus the acid being added has a chemical reaction, and you're going to pull out the red mud. As it says there on the side, that would be the waste material. It might be red because it has iron mixed in it, I'm not sure. Then you can see the chemical formula there that you have sodium mixed with aluminum hydroxide, possibly is what that's called. Oh, Justin, strike three. Not aluminum hydroxide, rather sodium aluminide, which actually is very similar in chemical formula, so I can kind of give myself a semi-pass. It's all about saying the right words, but at least we have the right word now, that chemical formula is called sodium aluminide. But it's aluminum mixed with an oxygen and a hydrogen, and four of them connected to that aluminum. So what you have to do is try to separate more materials from it. So it goes through a cooling process where the metal crystallizes. It doesn't mean necessarily that it's forming clear crystals or anything, but rather it's kind of solidifying. Then you put it in a rotary kiln. Kiln means that it's heated, and rotary means that it's spinning, so it's spinning and breaking it up, and then you get an aluminum oxide. Now, aluminum oxide just means that it has aluminum with some oxygen mixed in. This is kind of how aluminum naturally looks in most cases. Well, maybe naturally isn't the right word, but it reacts really quickly to oxygen and it produces a clear oxide layer. Unlike iron, which doesn't immediately do, but it will oxidize, and we call that rust. The aluminum oxide actually protects the rest of the inside of the aluminum from oxidizing. So kind of like a little barrier. And that's how we get kind of a pure version of aluminum. Third step is manufacture. At this step, raw materials are shaped at factories into parts and assembled into products that we buy. So the manufacturing step, if 2x4s or all types of wood were sold to, let's say, furniture stores, then they would have been cut and shaped into the furniture skeleton and then kind of, wrapped with all the foaming and padding and stuff like that. For the aluminum, it is going to be shaped into a can, a very thin can, and this is actually a low-grade version of aluminum. It's not very strong. It's totally different type of aluminum that you might find on your iPhone or an aircraft or a computer. This is a very low-grade, thin, weak aluminum because it's disposable. So at this stage, just like at all the stages, you're going to have some energy that's required. Gasoline to run machinery, electricity to run machinery. If you look at the next slide, I do have a video. I don't think I can play the video on my video because it gives weird feedback, but I did add this video into the playlist, so you could pause my video right now and jump to that. It's actually a pretty good video about how aluminum cans are made. So I pause my video and jump to that. It's a pretty interesting video, right? I really like it. I love the TV show, how it's made. It's pretty fun. And you can learn a lot just watching it. The fourth step is use. This is the step that you guys are most familiar with. It's made at a factory and then it's shipped over to you or more likely like Walmart or Target, some sort of store. You buy it on Amazon and it gets shipped. So there's a lot of transportation costs. It just waits on the shelf until someone wants to buy it. The wood, of course, would probably last longer because people keep furniture longer. And the aluminum cans, well, those are disposable, so we drink them and often toss them or recycle. At this stage, the products remain at this stage as long as they are usable or repairable. The last and final stage, or fifth stage, this is dispose. When the product is no longer of use, we get rid of it. Of course, you could continue to use the products and donate them, upcycle them, use them in a different way, and that would still stay within the use step. For the aluminum can, there's really not a way to reuse these. They're meant to be tossed or recycled. A lot of wood and building material that's been pulled out of buildings that are being reconstructed. So a lot of that material ends up going into the landfill. You don't really want to burn this wood like cooking because there's chemicals that have been mixed in here to keep termites out. So you wouldn't want to run. I've done it before, by the way. I have cooked marshmallows over kind of like scrap 2x4 pieces, and my stomach was hurting like within 30 minutes. It's a dumb mistake, and I even knew about it. I just totally forgot. But you don't want to burn this type of wood. So this is the fifth step, like I said, and you're throwing things away or recycling them. Now, Harlingen, we landfill them, and it's very common for a lot of cities to landfill them. And a landfill, as I think I've mentioned in a previous lesson, it's not just a hole in the ground, it's more complicated than that. And this is one of the most common situations or solutions used by cities. And it's got a lot of filtration for all the rainwater that's going through. It's got a lot of setup so that it doesn't leak into the soil and get into farmers' fields and get into our waterways, our drinking water. Definitely don't want that. They actually slowly decompose in a landfill a lot slower than if you just threw them in the ground. So like even food waste, like banana peels and leftover food, it produces a lot of methane gases. If you ever go by the landfill, you'll see pipes sticking out of the ground, and those pipes are to release the methane gas so they don't have like a buildup and kind of pop. Not like an explosion, though I suppose that's possible. It's really more like a pressure release. Some companies will actually take that methane gas and then use it to produce electricity by burning that gas. And that seems like a pretty clean way to deal with our landfills. This video is about car recycling, basically, to get the steel out. So take some time to jump over that video. It's pretty interesting. And then come back here. All right, welcome back. Let's talk about recycling products. So some products aren't recyclable. For instance, a tire. A tire is not recyclable, and not all plastics are recyclable. If you look at the picture on the bottom right, that is rubber mulch. Basically, it's shredded tires, the way that they make them. And you could look up a video on YouTube if you want. But they pull out all the steel cabling inside of them, all the mesh that makes the tire real stiff and strong. Then they shred up the rubber part. And it's actually way better than regular mulch. And that's not recycling, that's just turning it into something different. Recycling is when you can melt something down. Like the bench right there, or the what looks like wooden planks on the ground. Those are actually recycled from plastic bottles. If you've been in some of the Harlingen parks, they do have some plastic benches, and those are made from recycled bottles. But I have noticed that when they break, they just replace them with wood, so I'm assuming it might be more expensive. Now the question is that I would like to ask, well, why recycle? I think that there's a lot of people that think recycling is just kind of like the Green Party thing to do, or a very liberal thing to think about recycling, and protect the animals and protect the environment. And I think that's part of it, and I think that's a worthy thing to do, but it's way more than that. Recycling is actually quite profitable. So here's a graphic that I found. Let me just put my face in the trash over here. Here's a graphic that I found talking about aluminum can recycling. It says only 5% of the energy required to produce the primary metal initially is needed in the recycling process. About 75% of the aluminum ever produced is still in use. That means all the energy that's put into digging into the ground, breaking up the ore, taking it through all that chemical process that I showed you, and creating ingots of copper oxide that can be used to make aluminum cans. All the energy that's used to do that, with that same electric bill energy, I could produce 20 cans. So I could either dig a hole in the ground and spend the energy to make one aluminum can, or I can melt down the existing aluminum cans and with that same energy cost produce 20 cans. That's a huge savings. That's a savings to really think about. And especially after you just watched that video about Mike Biddle, and think about all the savings that we would then have with plastics, recycling really should be a money-making scheme. Not a scheme, but a really good money-making business. We've already paid the cost to pull this stuff out of the ground as a natural resource and then purify it into a raw material. Why pay that cost again and just dig a hole and throw it in the ground? We really, I think as a society, we really should start putting stock into organizing our trash out so that things that can be recycled will be recycled. And it can be simple enough to pull off. It just has to be a cultural shift. And I have to be honest, it's hard. Sometimes I'm just fine collecting stuff to recycling, and sometimes life gets really busy and I get tired of doing it. And I just throw things in the trash. But it has to become a cultural change. It just can't be a few people trying to do it. It's got to be the entire nation wanting to do this as a people. And I think profit wise, there are businesses there that should jump on this incentive. So I really like seeing videos like I showed you with Mike Biddle, where he is pioneering that. And I hope he finds a lot of success to continue to rescue a lot of our very expensive plastics that are just getting thrown away. The part in Harlingen that's complicated is the customer's role, and that is you have to do all the collection, and then the collector's role. They don't drive to your house and pick it up, you have to deliver it. So it does make it kind of hard to recycle in Harlingen, which is unfortunate because I grew up in McAllen, and for, I don't know, maybe since I was in junior high or high school, which is probably about 20 years ago now, they've had recycling picked up at your house. Here are just a few things that can be recycled: aluminum cans, steel cans that we get at the supermarket. Almost any bottle that you get from the grocery store can be recycled. Glass can be recycled, but remember, glass is made from sand, and sand is really abundant, and you don't really have to dig to get it. It's just laying on top of the earth. Paper can be recycled, newspapers, magazines, cardboard is recycled, and I know that Harlingen collects a few other things that can be recycled, and you can find it on their website. So if you're interested in recycling, you can just look up the recycling website. Of course, there are junkers and scrap yards around Harlingen. In fact, there's one fairly close to Condo Academy on Commerce Street, and they recycle all different types of metals, and you can take stuff to them. It's really not worth the money unless you bring a lot. One of the last things I want to show you here is the process to paper. Step one is raise and extract. So that would be cutting down trees. And you might think like, oh, deforestation or cutting down trees, that's not very environmental, but there actually are tree farmers, and there's a lot of them. They take their land, they grow trees on it, and then like every 10 years, they have the trees cut down and then they replant the trees. In fact, my sister's husband, his dad is a dairy farmer, and when he retired, he sold his dairy farm stuff and he turned his land into a tree farm. And so every 10 years, he has someone come cut down all the trees and then he replants them. So there actually are tree farms. Step two, process. We have the debarking, because we don't want all that bark for the paper. You have a chipper, cut it down into pieces. A thermomechanical refiner, which means thermo means heat, mechanical means mechanical energy. So in that case, it looks like it's spinning. So you have some thermomechanical refinery that is taking the chipped wood and turning it into paper. Then you have the paper making process, which I think you could technically call step three for manufacturing if you're think it kind of looks like something you might see inside of a newspaper factory, like you see in Spider-Man or something like that. So that could be a step 3, but I included it in step 2. Step 4 is use. So we have a newspaper printed. Step 5 is dispose. So you have curbside collection. It's been collected. It gets broken down, de-inked, cleaned and sent through a fine screen, and then a thermomechanical and recycled pulp mix. It seems similar to the earlier machine, but one for paper. Keep in mind that it's a lot cheaper to break down a newspaper to make another newspaper than it would be to break down a tree and make a newspaper. This is again why recycling is important, because it's cheaper to redo what you already made. Not everything can be recycled, like I said. I can't take this wooden piece and melt it down and make more 2x4s because that's not the property of wood. It is when it's in the paper form where you can kind of chop it up and remake it into another type of paper, but you can't do that, chop this up and, you know, turn it into another 2x4. So not every material has that quality. When we do have materials that can be recycled, we should probably continue to pursue to do that. Next week, I'm going to put forward a project that I've always been very excited about. I'm trying to figure out how to make this project doable from your home. It's a research project, by the way. So I'm working out how I'm approaching this, and it is going to involve researching and writing things out. It's very exciting because you're going to learn to research and kind of think through things yourself. I'm going to be there to guide you. It's a project that I really liked, and the project's going to be based on the product life cycle, those 5 steps of raise and extract, process, and manufacture, then use, and then final dispose. In a way, you've kind of looked at dispose when I showed you that video of Mike Biddle and recycling plastic. So I do want to kind of jump on different parts of that life cycle so that you can learn it yourself. So I will see you next week. I hope you have a restful weekend. I hope you're all caught up in all of your classes. I hope that everything is okay with you and your family. I'll see you next time on Edmodo.